The truth is, the best revenge is not screaming. It is not fighting. And it is not destroying your enemies the moment they hurt you. The best revenge is sitting at the same table with them, listening to them laugh, watching them smile, watching them look down on you, and letting them believe they have already won. Because nothing is more dangerous than a patient man who knows the truth. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab something to eat, get comfortable, and remember, the people in today's story had every chance to do the right thing. Nobody forced them to lie. Nobody forced them to betray. Nobody forced them to be cruel. They simply chose a different path. And before this story ended, that path led them exactly where they deserved to go. My name is Eugene. A retired truck driver told me this story one night at a truck stop outside Missouri. At first, I thought it was just another rich family drama. Then he told me the ending, and I never forgot it. Because this story is not really about money. It is not even really about revenge. It is about pride, silence, and the terrible mistake arrogant people make when they confuse kindness with weakness. The old man in this story was named Harlan. At 69 years old, Harlan looked like a man life had already pushed to the side. He lived in a small beige house near the edge of town. The paint on the porch was cracked. The mailbox leaned slightly to the left. And beside the driveway, he grew tomatoes in old wooden boxes. Every morning, before the sun became too hot, Harlan watered those plants with a green garden hose. He wore the same faded flannel shirt almost every day. His jeans were old. His boots were scratched. His watch looked like something bought from a discount bin. And his truck was impossible to miss. A 17-year-old Toyota Tundra with faded red paint, a noisy door, and more miles than most people believe possible. People saw Harlan and made a quick judgment. Poor, retired, harmless, maybe lonely, maybe forgotten. Harlan never corrected them. He had learned a long time ago that people reveal their true character when they think you have nothing to offer. And Harlan had built his whole life around that lesson. Years earlier, he had founded a small logistics and engineering company called Veron Ridge Systems. Back then, it was nothing. One warehouse, 3 employees, a broken loading dock, and a bank loan that almost swallowed him alive. For years, Harlan worked until his hands cracked. He slept on office floors. He drove delivery trucks himself. He fixed machines himself. He answered customer calls himself. He had no rich family behind him, no famous name, no shortcut, just discipline, patience, and a frightening ability to remember every detail. Slowly, Veron Ridge Systems grew. Then it expanded. Then it became powerful. Factories, logistics contracts, defense suppliers, private technology divisions, transportation networks across the country. By the time Harlan turned 60, Veron Ridge Systems was worth more money than most people could imagine. But almost nobody knew Harlan owned it. That was not an accident. He hated attention. He hated interviews. He hated standing on stages while people clapped for things they did not understand. So he stayed hidden. The company had public executives, a polished board, a clean corporate face. But the final ownership documents all led back to one man. Harlan, the old man with the tomato plants, the old truck, and the cheap watch. Only a few people knew the truth. His daughter, however, did not know everything. Her name was Sable. She was 31, soft-spoken, intelligent, and loyal in a way that sometimes hurt her. Harlan had raised her alone after her mother died. He had packed her lunches, fixed her school projects, sat in the front row at every graduation. And when life broke her heart, he was the one who sat beside her in silence until she could breathe again. Sable knew her father had once owned businesses. She knew he had money saved. She knew he was not helpless. But she did not know the full truth. She did not know that the company everyone respected in the city belonged to him. And Harlan wanted to keep it that way. Not because he did not trust her. Because he wanted her to be loved for herself. Not for what her father owned. That was why Callow worried him. Callow was Sable's fiancé. At first, he seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Tall, clean haircut, sharp suits, smooth voice, a smile that looked warm from a distance. He spoke about family, hard work, vision, leadership. He always knew the right words. And people loved him for it. When he met Harlan for the first time, Callow shook his hand firmly and said, "Sir, I know how much your daughter means to you. I promise I will always respect that." Harlan wanted to believe him. He really did. For Sable's sake. But time has a way of testing pretty words. And Callow's words began failing the test. It started with small things. At restaurants, he was polite to owners but cold to servers. At business events, he remembered the names of wealthy people but forgot the names of assistants. He smiled at investors, ignored janitors, praised powerful men, interrupted quiet women. Once, at a small diner, a young waitress brought him the wrong side dish. It was nothing, a tiny mistake. The girl apologized immediately. Callow stared at the plate, then looked at her as if she had insulted him. "Is this difficult for you?" he asked. The girl blinked. "I'm sorry, sir. I can fix it." "You should have fixed it before you brought it out." Sable looked embarrassed. "Callow, it's fine." But he continued. "People need standards. If no one corrects them, they stay useless." The waitress walked away with red eyes. Harlan watched quietly. He did not raise his voice. He did not embarrass Callow. He only asked one question in the parking lot. "Do you always treat people that way when they cannot help you?" Callow laughed. "Sir, with respect, you come from a different time. In my world, weakness gets expensive." Harlan nodded. But inside, something settled. A warning. Not anger. Not yet. Just a warning. Because cruelty rarely begins with a crime. It begins with permission. A person gives himself permission to treat one person badly. Then another. Then another. And soon cruelty becomes his normal language. Months later, Callow received the biggest opportunity of his life. The CEO position at Veyron Ridge Systems became available. The outgoing CEO retired after a health scare. The board began searching for a replacement. Dozens of candidates applied. Older executives, industry experts, people with decades of experience. But Callow moved through the process like a man already chosen. He impressed the board. He impressed investors. He gave speeches about modernization and bold leadership. He smiled for business magazines. He spoke about the future as if he personally owned it. Eventually, his appointment came down to one final approval. Harlan's approval. For 40 minutes, Harlan sat alone in his private office and stared at the document. He knew Callow was dangerous, but he also knew something else. Power reveals character faster than poverty ever could. A weak man may pretend to be humble. A hungry man may pretend to be grateful. But give him authority. Give him applause. Give him people who must obey him. And the mask begins to crack. So Harlan signed. Callow became CEO of Veyron Ridge Systems. And he never knew the old man he mocked had placed him there. The change happened quickly. At first, Callow was careful. He spoke about responsibility. He thanked the board. He praised the company's history. Then the interviews started. Then the magazine covers. Then the private dinners. Then the applause. And with every new room that admired him, Callow became less human. He started calling employees replaceable. He cut benefits while expanding executive bonuses. He fired 2 senior managers because they questioned him in a meeting. He demanded loyalty, but showed none. And around Harlan, his arrogance became personal. At family dinners, he made jokes. Small ones at first. "You still driving that museum piece? Does that truck come with a tetanus shot? You know, Harlan, I could get you something newer. Nothing fancy, just something less depressing." People laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but they laughed. Sable never laughed. But she also rarely stopped him. And that hurt Harlan more than the jokes. One evening, Callow arrived at Harlan's house in a black luxury car. He stepped out wearing a suit that probably cost more than Harlan's truck was worth. Sable was with him. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had been carefully shrinking herself to keep peace. Callow looked at the tomato plants beside the driveway and smirked. "Still farming, huh?" Harlan kept watering. "Still growing." Callow chuckled. "I admire that. Simple goals." Harlan turned off the hose. "What brings you here?" Callow placed an arm around Sable's waist. "We're hosting a private dinner next Friday. Very important people. Board members. Investors. Some press." Sable forced a smile. "Callow wants you there." Harlan looked at her. "Do you?" She hesitated. Only half a second. But Harlan saw it. "I do," she said quietly. Callow's smile sharpened. "It would mean a lot. Family image matters now. Especially with the wedding coming." Family image. Not family. Image. Harlan wiped his hands with an old towel. "I'll be there." Callow looked surprised, almost disappointed. Maybe he had expected resistance. Maybe he had hoped Harlan would refuse. But Harlan had survived too many storms to fear an invitation. 3 days before the dinner, Harlan received a call from Merrick. Merrick was a retired investigator. Old friend. Old ally. One of the few people who knew the full history of Veron Ridge Systems. He did not call often, and when he did, Harlan answered. What happened? Harlan asked. Merrick did not waste time. Someone has been digging through old federal records. Harlan stopped walking. He was standing in his backyard, holding a pair of gardening scissors. The wind moved softly through the tomato leaves. What records? A pause. Then Merrick said, The Ashford file. Harlan did not move. For several seconds, the whole world seemed to narrow into those 3 words. The Ashford file. 22 years earlier, before Veron Ridge became powerful, Harlan had nearly lost everything. A former partner accused him of stealing investor funds. Millions of dollars. Fake transfers appeared. Documents were leaked. Newspapers wrote about him like he was already guilty. Friends stopped answering calls. Banks froze accounts. Employees quit. For months, Harlan walked through town and felt people staring, whispering, judging. The accusation was false. Completely false. But false accusations do not need to be true to destroy a life. They only need to be loud. Harlan spent years proving what really happened. Years. And when the truth finally came out, the damage had already been done. He had won legally, but emotionally, something inside him had never fully returned. Who is looking? Harlan asked. We don't know yet, Merrick said. But whoever it is, they're not searching for truth. Harlan's hand tightened around the scissors. What are they searching for? Merrick's voice lowered. A weapon. That night, Harlan did not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight. The house was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. Beside him sat an old photograph of Sable as a child. She was missing a front tooth. Her hair was messy. She was holding a tomato almost as big as her face. Harlan smiled sadly at the photo. Back then, she believed he could fix anything. A broken toy, a bad dream, a scraped knee. But now she was grown, and the danger around her wore an expensive suit and said all the right things. Harlan wondered if he had waited too long. Then he opened a locked drawer under the kitchen counter. Inside was a black folder. Old, thick, unmarked. He placed it on the table. For the first time in years, he opened it. Bank records, court documents, signed statements, original reports. Everything connected to the Ashford file. Everything that had cleared his name. Everything that proved who had truly betrayed him. Harlan stared at the documents for a long time. He had kept them hidden because he hated living in the past. But now the past had been dragged toward his daughter. And that changed everything. The night of the dinner arrived cold and windy. The event was held at the Alder Room, one of the most exclusive private clubs in the city. Outside, black cars lined the entrance. Valets moved quickly. Reporters waited near the doors. Guests stepped out in tailored suits and evening dresses. Money was everywhere. In the watches, in the shoes, in the voices, in the way people looked around to see who noticed them. Then Harlan arrived in his old red Toyota. The valet stared at the truck like it had personally offended him. For a second, he did not move. Harlan rolled down the window. You parked these, right? The young valet blinked. Yes, sir. Harlan handed him the keys. Door sticks a little. Don't force it. It'll open if you treat it right. Behind him, 2 guests laughed. One whispered, Is he delivering something? Harlan heard it. He always heard. But he only smiled and walked inside. The ballroom was beautiful. Too beautiful. Crystal lights. White flowers. Gold-rimmed glasses. A stage at the front. Large screens on both sides. A live pianist playing soft music. Hundreds of guests filled the room. Executives. Investors. Politicians. Journalists. People who understood reputation as currency. Harlan saw Callow near the stage. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. He was surrounded by people congratulating him. He looked like a man at the center of his own universe. Then Callow saw Harlan. For a moment, something flashed in his eyes. Pleasure. Not happiness. Pleasure. The kind a cruel man feels when the trap finally closes. He walked over with open arms. Harlan, you made it. I said I would. Callow glanced toward the entrance. And the truck made it too. Impressive. A few nearby guests laughed. Sable appeared beside him. Her smile was tight. Dad, I'm glad you came. Harlan studied her face. She looked nervous. Very nervous. Are you okay? He asked. Before she could answer, Callow placed a hand on her back. She's fine. Big night. A little pressure is normal. Sable looked down. Harlan noticed. Callow guided them toward the table. Harlan's seat was far from the stage. Far from Sable. far from Callow, at the edge of the room, near the service doors. It was intentional, a small humiliation, a quiet message. You are here, but you are not important. Harlan said anyway, because sometimes the best way to study a trap is to step inside and let the builder relax. Dinner began. People talked, laughed, drank. Every few minutes, Harlan noticed guests glancing toward him, not casually, knowingly, as if they had already heard something, as if his name had been passed around before he arrived. Then he saw one journalist point a phone in his direction. Harlan looked away. His pulse stayed steady, but inside, his mind was moving fast. The Ashford file, Callow's invitation, the stage, the screens, the distant seat, the watching guests. This was not a dinner. It was a public execution, and he was the target. After dessert, the music faded. Lights dimmed. Callow stepped onto the stage. The room applauded. He waited for silence with the confidence of a man who believed the night belonged to him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. Thank you for being here. More applause. Tonight is about the future. The future of Veron Ridge Systems. The future of leadership. The future of trust. Harlan did not blink. That word, trust. Callow continued. But before we move forward, we must also have the courage to face the past. The room became quiet. Sable slowly turned her head toward Harlan. Her face changed. She knew something was wrong. Callow reached under the podium and pulled out a thick white envelope. Harlan felt the air shift. There it was. The weapon. Callow held it up for the room to see. Recently, documents came into my possession. Documents connected to a financial scandal many people tried to forget. Whispers spread instantly. Harlan sat still. Callow looked directly at him. And sadly, these documents involve someone very close to my future family. Sable stood halfway from her chair. Callow, what are you doing? He ignored her. The screens behind him turned on. A scanned bank transfer appeared. Then another. Then an old contract. Then a signature. Harlan's name highlighted in red. Gasps moved through the ballroom. Callow lowered his voice. This man was not simply a victim of old rumors. He paused. He may have been at the center of them. Every head turned toward Harlan. Hundreds of eyes. Judging. Questioning. Condemning. Just like 22 years ago. Sable covered her mouth. Dad. And that one word hurt more than the entire room. Because it was not an accusation. It was worse. It was doubt. Callow stepped away from the podium and looked almost sad. Almost noble. Almost believable. I wanted to handle this privately, he said. No, he didn't. Harlan knew that. Everyone would know soon. But when a company is built on trust, silence becomes betrayal. Some guests nodded. A few even clapped. Then more joined. The applause grew. They were applauding Callow. Applauding the man who had just humiliated an old father in front of his daughter. Applauding the lie because it was dressed like courage. Harlan slowly stood. The applause weakened. Callow smiled. There it was. The moment he had wanted. The old man standing alone. Poor looking. Accused. Cornered. Powerless. Callow tilted his head. Do you have anything to say, Harlan? The room waited. Sable stared at him with tears in her eyes. Cameras pointed toward him. Phones recorded. The trap was complete. Or at least Callow believed it was. Harlan looked at the screen. At the fake transfer. At the old signature. At the date in the corner. And suddenly his expression changed. Not much. Just enough. Because that date was impossible. That account had been closed 6 months before the transfer supposedly happened. Which meant the document was not merely wrong. It was manufactured. Harlan looked back at Callow. Then, for the first time all night, he smiled. Not happily. Not warmly. But calmly. Like a man who had just found the loose thread that could unravel the whole suit. He buttoned his jacket. Looked around the silent ballroom. Then spoke in a low voice. You should have checked the account dates before you built your little show. Callow's smile disappeared. Just for 1 second. But 1 second was enough. Because in that second, Harlan saw fear. And the night had only begun. Part 2. For 1 second, the entire ballroom became silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. Hundreds of people stared at Harlan. Then at Callow. Then at the giant screens. Nobody understood exactly what Harlan meant. Not yet. But everyone felt the shift. A few moments earlier, Callow had controlled the room. He had the microphone, the stage, the screens, the documents, the applause. He had the perfect suit and the perfect sad expression. He had made himself look like a brave man exposing a dark truth. and Harlan looked like a tired old father caught in a scandal. But then Harlan said one sentence. You should have checked the account dates before you built your little show. And suddenly Callow no longer looked brave. He looked surprised. Only for a second. But sometimes 1 second tells the whole truth. Callow quickly smiled again. Too quickly. What are you talking about? His voice was still smooth, but not as smooth as before. Harlan looked at the screen. The transfer you're showing. Callow glanced at it. So, that account was closed before that date. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Callow laughed. It sounded forced. That's a serious claim. No, Harlan said. It's a simple fact. The murmur grew louder. Several journalists began typing. A few board members leaned forward. Sable stood frozen near her chair, her eyes moving between her father and the screen. She looked terrified, not because she believed Callow, not completely, but because she had no idea where the truth ended and the trap began. Callow lifted the microphone closer to his mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why I did not want to do this tonight. That was a lie. He had wanted this night. He had built this night. He had invited the crowd, prepared the screens, and placed Harlan at the edge of the room like a defendant waiting for a sentence. But he knew how to act wounded, and some people still believed him. This is painful for everyone, Callow continued, especially for Sable. At the sound of her name, Sable flinched. Harlan saw it, and something cold settled inside him. Callow was not just attacking him. He was using her. Again. I hoped Harlan would be honest, Callow said. Instead, he attacks the evidence. Harlan remained standing. Evidence should survive being questioned. A few people whispered. That sentence landed. Callow noticed. His eyes sharpened. Then he nodded toward the technician near the stage. The screen changed. Another document appeared. A contract. Old. Scanned. Stamped. Harlan's signature was highlighted in red. Callow's confidence returned a little. This contract links you to the shell company used in the Ashford fraud. The crowd reacted again. Gasps. Whispers. A woman near the front said, Oh my God. Harlan studied the document. Then he looked at Callow. Who gave this to you? Callow smiled. A protected source. Convenient. Reliable. Then bring him here. The room went still again. Callow's jaw tightened. This is not a courtroom. No, Harlan said. It's worse. In a courtroom, lies face consequences. That one hurt Callow. Everyone saw it. His smile twitched. For the first time that night, the young CEO looked less like a leader and more like a man trying to hold a mask in place while it slipped. Sable stepped forward. Callow, stop this. He looked at her. For one brief moment, the charm disappeared. His eyes became hard. Sable, sit down. The words were not loud, but they were sharp, cold, commanding. Several guests noticed. Harlan definitely noticed. Sable did not sit, and for the first time that evening, something changed in her face. Not certainty, not yet, but resistance. Callow saw it and softened his voice immediately. I'm trying to protect you. No, Sable whispered. You're humiliating my father. Callow looked back at the crowd. He needed control. He needed the room. So he turned the pain into performance again. I understand this is emotional, he said, but emotion cannot erase facts. Then he turned toward Harlan. Tell them, did you or did you not sign documents connected to Ashford? Harlan looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at his daughter. He did not answer immediately, and that pause was dangerous, because guilty people pause. So do wounded people. And to a crowd hungry for drama, the difference is often invisible. Callow used the silence. You see? More whispers. A few people nodded. Harlan finally spoke. Yes. The room exploded. Sable's face collapsed. Callow smiled. There it was. The word he wanted. The soundbite. The headline. The clip that would spread online before midnight. Old man admits connection to fraud documents. Callow raised his hand as if asking for calm. But he was enjoying every second. Thank you for finally being honest. Harlan looked at him. I said I signed documents connected to Ashford. He paused. I did not say I signed those documents. The room quieted again. Callow's smile weakened. Harlan continued. The original Ashford documents were reviewed by federal investigators 22 years ago. Every signature, every account, every transfer. He looked toward the screen. That document was never part of the case. Callow shook his head. You expect us to believe that? No, Harlan said. I expect you to verify it. Several board members exchanged looks. That was a problem for Callow, Because powerful people can forgive many things, but they do not like being used in a public lie, especially not in front of reporters. Callow changed tactics. Fast. If you are innocent, why did you disappear from public business after the Ashford scandal? That question hit differently. The room became interested again. It sounded reasonable. It sounded sharp. It sounded like something a guilty man would struggle to answer. Harlan took a slow breath. Because that question touched the wound Callow could not understand. He had not disappeared because he was guilty. He had disappeared because he was tired. Tired of microphones in his face. Tired of strangers calling him a thief. Tired of watching friends cross the street to avoid him. Tired of seeing his daughter come home from school crying because other children repeated what their parents said at dinner. But he could not say all of that here. Not yet. So he said only this. Because when the world decides you are guilty before hearing the truth, you learn to stop asking the world for permission to live. The room softened. Just slightly. But enough. Sable lowered her hand from her mouth. Her eyes changed again. Callow saw the shift and hated it. He had expected Harlan to break. To shout. To deny everything too loudly. To look desperate. Instead, the old man stood there like a tree in a storm. Bent by years. But not broken. Callow moved to the next weapon. He nodded again. The screen changed. This time a photograph appeared. Old. Grainy. It showed Harlan standing beside another man outside a building. Callow pointed to the image. This is Harlan with Garrick, the man investigators believed organized the Ashford fraud. The name hit Harlan like a stone. Garrick. He had not spoken that name in years. Not aloud. Not even alone. Garrick had once been his closest friend. His business partner. The man who knew his family. The man who sat at his kitchen table. The man who gave Sable birthday gifts. And then he betrayed them all. Callow's voice grew stronger. You claimed you were only a victim. But this photo shows your connection. Harlan stared at the image. For the first time that night, the pain on his face was visible. Not fear. Pain. Real pain. The kind that cannot be faked. Callow mistook it for weakness. So tell us, he said. How close were you? Harlan did not look away from the photo. Close enough to be betrayed. The room went quiet. Callow blinked. Harlan continued. Garrick was my partner. My friend. My daughter called him uncle when she was little. Sable looked stunned. She had heard pieces of this story before. Never like this. Harlan's voice remained calm, but something underneath it trembled. When the money disappeared, he made sure my name was on enough papers to make me look guilty. Then he vanished. Callow smiled faintly. That's a convenient story. It was not convenient for my wife when reporters followed her to the hospital. The room stilled. Callow stopped smiling. Harlan looked at him fully now. It was not convenient when my daughter came home from school asking if I was going to prison. Sable started crying silently. It was not convenient when I sold almost everything I owned to keep employees paid, while people like you would have hidden behind lawyers. The words landed hard. Several guests looked down. Not out of shame exactly, but discomfort. Because now the story was no longer clean. It was no longer a brave CEO exposing a fraud. It was becoming something messier. Something human. And human pain is harder to applaud. Callow felt the room slipping. So he did what desperate men do. He became crueler. You're very good at sounding like a victim, he said. Sable turned toward him. Callow. But he kept going. Maybe that's how you survived all these years. Maybe that's why people feel sorry for you. The old truck. The little house. The tomato plants. It's a wonderful act. A few people looked uncomfortable now. Callow stepped closer to the edge of the stage. But I see you clearly, Harlan. You're not humble. You're hiding. Harlan studied him. And what are you hiding? Callow froze. It was a quiet question, but it hit like a door slamming shut. What? Harlan repeated. What are you hiding? Callow laughed. I'm not the one with fake innocence and old scandals. No, Harlan said. You're the one who spent weeks preparing a public attack on your future wife's father. The room shifted again. Callow's fingers tightened around the microphone. You brought reporters, Harlan said. Callow said nothing. You placed me at a table near the service doors. Still nothing. You prepared screens. Silence. You leaked rumors before I arrived. Now several guests looked at each other. Because some of them had heard rumors. Exactly as Harlan said. And you call this painful, Harlan continued. But you look more excited than hurt. That sentence changed the room. People began seeing what had been in front of them the whole time. Callow was not grieving. He was performing. And the performance suddenly looked ugly. Callow's face hardened. Enough. There it was. The real voice. Not the polished executive. Not the loving fiancé. The controlling man underneath. Security, Callow said. Two security guards near the wall looked confused. Callow pointed at Harlan. Remove him. Sable stepped forward. No. Callow turned toward her. Sable, do not make this worse. You made this worse. The words were quiet, but they cut through the ballroom. For the first time, Callow looked truly angry. Not embarrassed. Angry, because she had challenged him in public. And men like Callow can tolerate many things, but not public defiance from someone they believe they own. He stepped off the stage, the microphone still in his hand. Sable, you are emotional. Sit down. She did not move. Harlan watched his daughter. And in that moment, despite everything, he felt proud. She was scared. She was shaken. She was confused. But she was standing. Callow turned back to the crowd, trying to recover. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. This is exactly the kind of chaos I hoped to avoid. That was almost funny. But nobody laughed. Then a man near the front stood up. One of the board members. His name was Alden. He was older, serious, and known for speaking only when necessary. Callow, Alden said, who authenticated these documents. Callow's face tightened again. As I said, a trusted source. Alden did not sit down. That is not an answer. The ballroom became dangerously quiet. Callow looked at him. We can discuss it privately. We are already discussing it publicly, Alden said. Several people murmured approval. Callow was losing them. Slowly, but clearly. Then Alden said the sentence Callow feared most. Until the documents are independently verified, I suggest you stop presenting them as fact. The room reacted. Small whispers, nods, phone cameras, journalists. Everything Callow wanted to use against Harlan was now turning toward him. Callow's face darkened. He forced a smile. Of course, transparency matters. Harlan almost smiled. There was that word again. Transparency. People who hide the most love that word. Callow turned toward Harlan. You may think this changes things. His voice was lower now, more private, but the microphone still caught every word. It doesn't. Harlan looked at him. Callow continued. You are still exactly what you appear to be. An old man trying to protect a reputation nobody remembers. A few gasps moved through the room. Even some of Callow's supporters looked uncomfortable now. Sable stared at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Harlan said nothing for a moment. Then he nodded. You're right about one thing. Callow waited. I am old. A few people smiled nervously. Harlan continued. And old men have one advantage. He paused. We remember what young men think nobody will ever find. Callow's expression changed. Not much, but enough. Fear again. There it was. A small flash. Then gone. Harlan turned toward Sable. I'm sorry you had to see this. She whispered. Dad, what is happening? Harlan wanted to tell her everything. That Callow had not earned the CEO's seat by accident. That Veyron Ridge systems belonged to him. That he had been watching for months. That Merrick was already tracing the fake documents. That tonight's attack had not surprised him as much as Callow believed. But not yet. Timing mattered. Truth without timing can become noise. So Harlan only said, the truth is happening. Then he reached into his coat pocket. Callow's eyes followed the movement. So did half the room. Harlan removed a small black phone. Old. Plain. Nothing impressive. He pressed one button, then placed it on the table. A voice came through the speaker. Merrick's voice. Calm. Cold. Professional. Harlan, we confirmed it. The ballroom froze. Callow stopped breathing. Harlan looked directly at him. Merrick continued. The Ashford documents shown tonight were digitally assembled from 3 separate sources. At least 2 signatures were copied from unrelated filings. And the account number on the first transfer belonged to a closed account. Gasps erupted. Callow's face went pale. But Merrick was not finished. We also traced the payment for the document package. Callow took one step back. The crowd sensed blood now. Harlan's voice remained quiet. To whom? Merrick answered. The payment came from a consulting account connected to Callow's private office. The room exploded. People stood. Journalists shouted questions. Board members turned toward Callow. Sable covered her mouth and stepped backward. Callow looked trapped now. Truly trapped. But the worst part had not arrived yet. Harlan picked up the phone. Send everything to Alden and the board. Already done, Merrick said. Then Harlan ended the call. The ballroom was chaos. Callow raised the microphone. This is absurd. This is a setup. Harlan looked at him calmly. Yes. That one word stopped him. Callow blinked. Harlan continued. It is. The room quieted again. Harlan stepped away from his table and slowly walked toward the stage. Every camera followed him. Every eye followed him. For the first time that night, he did not look like a forgotten old man. He looked like a man walking into a room he had already measured, mapped, and understood. He stopped a few feet from Callow, then said softly, but clearly, "You built a trap tonight." Callow swallowed. Harlan looked around the ballroom. "But you forgot something." A long pause. Then Harlan looked back at him. "You never checked who owned the floor beneath it." Callow's face changed completely. Confusion, fear, realization trying to form, but not yet complete. Sable stared at her father. Alden stared too. The board members exchanged looks. And somewhere in the room, one journalist whispered, "What does that mean?" Harlan did not answer. Not yet. He simply turned toward the screens and smiled, because the next document about to appear would not be about Ashford. It would be about ownership. And once that truth reached the screen, Callow's life would never be the same again. Part 3. The ballroom waited. Every camera pointed toward Harlan. Every guest watched the old man in the worn jacket. And for the first time that night, nobody was laughing at him. Callow stood near the stage, pale and stiff. Only minutes earlier, he had looked untouchable. Now he looked like a man hearing footsteps behind a locked door. Harlan looked toward the technician. "Put the next document on the screen." The technician hesitated. Callow snapped, "Don't." Nobody moved. Then Alden, the senior board member, turned sharply. "Put it up." The technician obeyed. The screen went black. Then a new document appeared. At first, people did not understand. It looked like a corporate ownership record. Dry, legal, boring, until one line was highlighted. Final beneficial owner, Harlan. The room froze. Then came the whispers. "No, that can't be. Is that real?" Callow stared at the screen. His mouth opened slightly. No words came out. Harlan spoke calmly. Veyron Ridge Systems was founded 28 years ago. He looked around the room. "I built it with 3 employees, 1 warehouse, and debt I could barely breathe under." Nobody interrupted. "I stepped away from public leadership years ago." He turned toward Callow. "But I never stepped away from ownership." The room erupted. Reporters shouted. Board members stood. Investors looked at Callow like he had turned into poison. Sable covered her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. Not from shame this time. From shock. Her father had been sitting beside them for years, quiet and ordinary. And all this time, he had owned the company Callow bragged about running. Callow finally spoke. "No, that's impossible." Harlan looked at him. "Is it?" Callow pointed at the screen. "I'm the CEO." "Yes," Harlan said. "You were." That single word hit harder than a slap. "Were." The whole room heard it. Callow heard it too. His face twisted. "You can't do this." Harlan's voice remained gentle. "I didn't do this, Callow. You did." Then Alden stepped forward with his phone in hand. "The board has received the verification packet." He looked at Callow. The forged documents, the payment trail, the internal consulting account, and the ownership confirmation. Callow shook his head. "This is a setup." Alden's expression was cold. "No, this is evidence." Callow looked around desperately. At investors. At journalists. At executives. At people who had laughed at Harlan minutes earlier. Nobody helped him. Not one person. Because power attracts loyalty. But collapse reveals whether loyalty was ever real. Then Sable stepped forward. Her voice shook. "Did you know?" Callow turned to her. "Sable, listen. Did you know those documents were fake?" He said nothing. That silence answered everything. Sable took one step back. It was small, quiet, but it ended the engagement. Callow felt it. Everyone felt it. "Sable, I did this for us." "No," she whispered. "You did this for control." Callow's eyes hardened. For 1 second, the charming man disappeared completely. "You have no idea what your father was hiding." Harlan answered before Sable could. "I was hiding wealth. You were hiding cruelty." The room went silent again. Then Harlan turned to Alden. "Effective immediately, Callow is suspended from all executive authority, pending a full legal review." Alden nodded. Already in motion. Callow laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you noble? You let me become CEO, just to test me?" Harlan looked sad now. "No, I let you become CEO because my daughter loved you, and I wanted to believe I was wrong." That hurt more than anger would have. Harlan continued. You had chances. A pause. With employees. Another pause. With my daughter. Another. With me. He looked directly into Callow's eyes. And every time, you chose the smallest version of yourself. Security approached. Not aggressively. Professionally. Callow looked at the guards, then at the crowd. The same crowd he had invited to witness Harlan's humiliation. Now they were watching his. That was the elegance of it. No shouting. No revenge speech. No childish threats. Just truth. And consequences. As security escorted Callow away, journalists followed with questions. Did you forge the documents? Did you misuse company funds? Were you trying to force Harlan out of his daughter's life? Callow said nothing. Because for once, words could not save him. When he reached the doors, he turned back. His eyes found Harlan. There was hatred there, but also fear. Harlan did not look away. He simply nodded once. Not as an enemy, as a man closing a file. Then Callow disappeared through the doors. The ballroom remained stunned. Slowly, people began leaving. Quietly. Awkwardly. Nobody knew how to behave after applauding a lie. Sable walked to her father. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then she whispered, I doubted you. Harlan's face softened. You were hurt and confused. I should have trusted you. He shook his head. You should have asked questions. That's different. She cried then. Not loudly. Just enough for the years of pressure to escape. Harlan hugged her. The same way he had when she was small. No speeches. No judgment. Only his hand on the back of her head. After a while, Sable looked toward the empty stage. Why didn't you tell me you owned everything? Harlan smiled sadly. Because I never wanted people to measure you by my money. But Callow, I needed to know if he loved you without knowing what stood behind you. Sable wiped her tears. And he failed. Harlan looked toward the doors where Callow had vanished. No, he revealed himself. Outside, the cold night air felt clean. The old red Toyota waited near the entrance. The same truck people had laughed at. The same truck Callow mocked. The valet stood beside it, nervous now. Very nervous. Harlan took the keys with a small smile. Door still sticks. The young man swallowed. A little, sir. Harlan nodded. Then don't force it. Some things open only when handled right. Sable laughed through her tears. For the first time all night, the sound felt real. They got into the truck. The engine coughed once, then started. Behind them, the bright ballroom glowed with broken pride and expensive silence. Sable looked at her father. What happens now? Harlan shifted into drive. Now. He looked at the road ahead. Now we let the truth finish what it started. Months later, Callow lost everything he had built on lies. His position, his reputation, his future in the industry. The forged documents became part of an official investigation. The consulting account exposed more than one hidden payment. And the people who once praised him began pretending they had never trusted him at all. That is how the world often works. It claps loudly for power, then disappears when power falls. But Harlan did not celebrate. He returned to his small house. His tomatoes. His old truck. His quiet mornings. Because real power does not need to prove itself every day. And real revenge does not always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like evidence. Sometimes it looks like an old man sitting quietly at a table, letting his enemies laugh, until the truth is ready to speak. And when the truth finally speaks, it does not need to raise its voice. The end.